it's the same person in the district that is part of like overseeing that. So I have called it the perfect storm. Some of you may remember this movie with George Clooney. If you haven't ever seen it, I recommend you go watch it. But we are going to end a little bit differently. In the perfect storm, they didn't come out of that as well as they would have liked to. The entire ship went down, but that is not going to be the case under your leadership. Your ship is going to keep going, and we are going to help you get there. And if you ever have any questions, make sure you're putting them in the chat. We're going to do this in a kind of a panel discussion. I'm going to go through what the basic laws are, and then I'm going to throw it to each of our panelists to kind of share how they've managed that in their school district. If we don't hit something you want, again, put your your question in the chat, and we will get to it at the end. So with that said, new SHAC rules. There are, with HB 1525, there were a lot of rules, and we do not have them all listed here. There is a link at the bottom of the screen, and I'm sure that we can make that live for you. Maybe Michelle can put it even in the chat, but when she shares this PowerPoint, you would be able to go directly to the enrolled version. And if you don't know that, when you're looking at legislation, you always want to pull the enrolled version. There's a ton, there's an introduced version, there's all these different things, but the enrolled version is the one that we have to live by. So the notification of all SHAC meetings, it has to be 72 hours in advance now, and it has to be a central admin office of each campus. Audio or video recording of every meeting, and that has to be posted as well. Minutes have to be taken and submitted to the school district within 10 days, and then posted if the district has a website. The Board of Trustees also must adopt a policy on how to choose their sex education curriculum. And then that also then part of that process has to require that the SHAC does the actual review and recommendations, and they hold 2 public meetings to get information from the public before they take their recommendation to the board. The board he has to hear and consider and act on the recommendation of the board. Doesn't mean that the SHAC, that doesn't mean they have to accept it, but they have to act on it. And then they must do it within a public meeting with a record vote. And then the one that I think I've gotten several emails on most recently is the written parent consent. You must have, it's an opt-in now, where you used to be able to choose. You must have written consent that the student can be part of that curriculum. That is also in other laws, and we'll get to that in a minute. But just so that you know, there is a written part, and it has to be a separate notification. So that is one thing that I think has been a little bit more challenging for some, because we used to put it with stuff parents were getting, and now it has to be separate. So before we move on from this slide, I'm going to throw it to Micaeli first. Can you kind of share how your district has managed this? And more importantly, have y'all already had to do a resolution in front of your board? And did you use the TASB one, or did you create your own?
Yeah, so Micaeli Smith, Director of PE Health and Wellness for Comal ISD, housed in the New Braunfels area, if you're familiar, but we span 585 square miles, so very large geographically. To provide a little bit of context, we actually began this process pre-COVID through a subcommittee, and we got started. There wasn't an update available for the curriculum that we were using, which was Baylor Scott and White. And so we formed the subcommittee. We started looking at 4 different curriculums, and we were going nowhere quickly. We had very different opinions on both ends of the spectrum. And so COVID shut us down, and over that time, a update became available, and new legislation, obviously. So started with presenting to district administration a clear timeline, excuse me, and then presented to the board in July, information only, presented again in August. We wrote our own resolution. They voted unanimously to convene the SHAC, and that's where we are currently. So we proposed that the SHAC would look primarily at the update and go from there. Did I cover it? Or what other specific questions do you have? Can you hear me? Sorry.
I should not mute myself. How
Okay,
did you
I was
choose
like,
your
I think it's
curriculum? Did you
me.
have like a particular tool that you utilize, or did you use something in-house?
Yeah, great question. So when we were looking at completely changing to a new curriculum, we, along with our curriculum and design team, created our own rubric, which I highly recommend if you're going in the direction of completely changing from what you're using currently, because it provides an unbiased set of criteria to navigate discussion for obviously a very highly contentious topic. So that's the avenue that we went originally. Now that there is an update available through Living Well Aware, as she references it as the 8th edition of Baylor Scott and White, that curriculum has been widely accepted by our teachers and community. So to make it easier on all of us, we're starting there and seeing how the SHAC feels about that particular update. In the event they would recommend that we move in a different direction, then we'll kind of have to start this process over again. But that is how we determined at this point what curriculum to look at.
So Rachel, there's
Yeah.
several questions that are cropping up about some of the things that you talked about in the House bill, like if on the 72-hour notification, is that just for the meeting date, time, and place, or is that the agenda as well?
I believe Micaeli or Lori or LeeAnn, feel free to jump in because I've been out of it a little bit, but I do believe that you have to post the agenda and it has to post the meeting time and location for where it's going to be. And and this is the key. And I didn't say this beginning, but I'm going to say this now. The most important thing you can do as a leader for the SHAC or for health, for P, make sure that you're on the same page with everybody in your district. Make sure that you all agree with this is the process we're going to follow all the way up to the top. You need to determine what is the central office. Is it going to be that we're going to put it on the bulletin board? Because that is a request. How are you going to get it out to all of your campuses? So if you're a big district and you're going to get it posted, make sure that's on the web, but it has to be the agenda. Now, it doesn't have to be the detailed agenda. It just needs to talk about what the topics are going to be. And it does have to be the time and location that that meeting will occur. Lori or Micaeli or LeeAnn, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I think you pretty much covered it. I would just add that it does have to be in the front office or somewhere that's accessible for the community to see of every single campus. So what I do is I post it here at the district, and then I send it to all of our senior associates or principal secretaries and reiterate that due to new legislation, we ask that they post it somewhere where the community can see it.
Let me just add one thing on that. I've had a lot of people ask me about that requirement, and you're not expected to go around and make sure that each principal posts them. If you send them, you've given it your best effort to make sure that the campus was informed. So as long as you sent the agenda and you have it posted in the central office, then that's the requirement. No one's going to go around and check and make sure that every campus has that posted. So I know that's come up quite a few times. The other one is about the minutes. They're supposed to be posted 10 days after the meeting, and most people don't approve the minutes until their next SHAC meeting. How are you guys dealing with this? Are you posting unapproved minutes or what?
Actually says in the law, it says post with intent, and it says typically if approved by the board or district, what it typically says. So what I typically do is, obviously when you're leading a meeting, it's very difficult to take meeting minutes at the same time. So usually have a member of the SHAC take minutes. What I usually do is review and compile all those minutes in a way that's readable and capable of being digested by the public and or the community, as well as the other SHAC members. So I update those minutes, and then typically I send them out to all of our SHAC meetings like, hey, here's a review of our minutes. If there's anything I missed or anything that we needed to add additionally that were not added, please let me know. I will update those. And then I usually send them to my supervisor as a quick review. If she doesn't have any objections, which she typically does not, then I go ahead and have them submitted to be posted on our public website. So that's usually our process. And most times, you know, you try to say 10 days, but in the law, it does read unless, you know, the last time I read the updated and enrolled version, it changed that it basically says if at all possible and also approved at the district level. So that's our process.
Micaeli or Lori, do you have something different?
We're pretty much the same.
Okay.
I know some districts that have shared out with me as some post it as a draft with draft as a watermark behind it so that they can see that it's a draft. And then they make sure that they repost the approved ones when they do get approved. So I've heard of a couple of different things on this. Unfortunately, the law was vague as to whether it did not say approved or draft. And so I think that that really depends on your particular school district. I do know some school districts have said that they are following what the board does and they don't post minutes unless they're approved and they're waiting until they approve them. So again, I think you just need to make sure you talk to the people in your school district and make sure you are all on the same page of what the expectations will be. Micaeli, did you have something to add?
No, ma'am, we do the same thing as well.
Okay. And then Lori, did you have other questions, Michelle, that you want us to answer?
Yeah, there's one that I think we need to explain. The SHAC, if the SHAC doesn't submits a curriculum for approval to the board and the board doesn't approve it, that they don't have to approve the SHAC's recommendation. What the SHAC is an advisory committee, but the SHAC has to review the curriculum. So if the district has a different curriculum that the SHAC has not approved of, but has reviewed, the board can still approve that curriculum, even though the SHAC didn't approve it. Does
The
that?
board could also send you back to work. And they could say, we want you to go back and review additional curriculums, or we want you to reconsider tweaking this curriculum, or the board really, it, like Michelle said, it's an advisory committee. So at that point in time, you're at the direction of the board and what they decide you need to do. So if they don't approve it, they should be giving you some sort of action that you're going to go forth with from that point.
Okay.
So then were there any other questions?
I think that's it for this moment.
Okay, so then I'm going to throw this one to Lori and LeeAnn. Let's do Lori first. How has your SHAC felt about having their meeting either recorded, video or audio? And how do they feel about the minutes and agenda being posted? Have you gotten any feedback from them?
We've been good with all of it. I think COVID kind of jump started that, and we were already recording a lot of our meetings. And so we just continue. I mean, it was just like a continuation for us. We've actually increased our parent participation because more people can attend since they have babies. You don't need a babysitter or whatever. The posting hasn't really been that different. The district's already kind of used to that for the school board meetings. So it was just kind of a carryover for us on all of that.
LeeAnn, do you have anything to add?
I totally agree with Lori. It was just a communication. I agree, since we were in COVID, we were already virtually meeting for a period of time. And then it was just a matter of, this is the process and this is what we do. And they were okay with that.
Micaeli?
So I would say our one thing we did add is we purchased a video camera. So when we do have our in-person meetings, we can video record as well as audio record.
And Micaeli?
I would say no major changes in participation with the new changes. We weren't recording our meetings, so that was new for us, and participants felt more comfortable with audio than video. But since we started, I haven't noticed any lack of engagement in meetings because of it.
Well, I'm going to throw one more question at y'all, because I know getting people to want to be part of SHAC can sometimes be difficult. when you have that conversation with members that are becoming part of SHAC or interested in being on SHAC, are you sharing this sort of information about the meetings and what will transpire in the meeting before? Let's go with LeeAnn first.
Probably more in depth in our first meeting, but I do a very big outline of, you know, what the SHAC requirements are, what is the SHAC composed of, and why, you know, what are those 8 components that we will hit, how often we meet, where we meet, how we'll meet. Obviously, I do communicate that we will meet in person. There is also an option to attend or participate virtually as well. And then I always link the law. I think to go any more in depth than giving the overview of, hey, this is what we expect if you're a member, this is what we expect if you choose to attend, just as a public meeting, if it is a public meeting, or as a public member or a community member or a parent. So you always have the opportunity to know outside of the overview that I provide of this is how our meetings are conducted, and this is the business we're going to try to you know, communicate and review.
Lori, did you have anything to add to that?
Nope, that's pretty spot on.
Micaeli?
I do actually have a question about adding virtual participation to an in-person meeting, if I'm allowed to ask questions as well. I'm still learning too. Do you have someone who is monitoring that, or how do they actively engage also virtually? Or is it kind of just like you can watch it, and then if you have questions, people ask later?
Are you asking LeeAnn? You want to?
Yeah, LeeAnn, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say, Laura, you go first, and then I'll go off to you.
No, that's fine. We're pretty much kind of like we're sitting now, like kind of like almost like a webinar. And then if people have things that they want to input, they can jump in and ask questions that way.
We haven't went to the length that Lori and them have in Spring ISD. I have not purchased a camera. We had just function on just either our webcams or the computer devices that we've had in the past. And that way, because this year I was thinking about streaming it. But in past, a lot of times, specifically if our SHAC members were unable to attend in person, then we've always left it open so that they can verbally communicate, or if someone that's not a member were attending and they had questions or input, or even if we had an outside vendor there to present information, we've always left the channel open. So, I mean, obviously you can ask questions or communicate through chat, but then you can verbally communicate as well.
Awesome, thank you.
And then just so everybody knows, we also had somebody say that you had someone that monitors it was in the
great.
chat. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. What if they don't approve for you to review it? Is that a possibility? Of course it's a possibility. And I know you're referring to the board. It's always a possibility. And if that's the case, please keep in mind human sexuality and abstinence education or sex education does not have to be taught in the state of Texas. A school district can opt to teach it. And if that's the case, then all these laws apply. But if a school district decides not to teach it, then they can also choose that route. Then they have to figure out how they're going to address certain TEKS that we'll get to in a little while. But that is one of the things that the school district would have to review. So that is a possibility. Let's see, what other things are we seeing? Do you see any more, Michelle, that I need to get?
I think I answered some of them, and then the rest of them I think were covered.
Okay, great. So then let's move on to just make sure. I want to kind of give everybody an idea of what y'all do in your SHAC. Just kind of give us, and we're going to start with Lori, and then we'll go to LeeAnn and Micaeli. Let us know how many times your SHAC meets. Do you kind of already cover this virtual and in person, or do you do a combo? And then how did COVID impact your participation? Did you get more participation because y'all went virtual? I think some of you hit this. I know in our chat, we had someone say their participation has gone up dramatically since they went virtual. And then do you have 50% of parents on your SHAC, which I hope you do, but and explain why you have to have 50%.
Sure. So we do meet the required 4 times a year. Sometimes we meet more often, like last year, we had to add the extra 2 meetings. I think we actually added 3. But we do that required 4 at minimum. And then we are, like next week, we're meeting virtually, but we intend to meet in person most of the year, or hybrid, where we can have it virtual and in person at the same time. Our participation has increased, like a lot of people said, I think because of the virtual aspect. And I think also because how COVID has put health in the front line of media. And that's given us more opportunities to talk about what we do. And people more concerned about like what's happening in the schools when it regards to health. And then of course, with the new TEKS adoption, that really put that aspect in the front line as well. But yes, our participation has increased. And is it 50% parents? Our parent participation has increased. I wouldn't say that our 50% is all parents, but our community members have really increased as well. So we are definitely 50% non-staff, over 50% non-staff, but it's been a lot of community members as well as parents.
And LeeAnn, do you want to add to that?
Very much like Lori's, if I'm recalling the question correctly. Same, specifically on, we get some really great community involvement. We have great parents that have been a part of our SHACs with their children throughout their progression throughout our district. Can't say we've met 50% yet, but I would say that because we are hybrid, our participation is pretty consistent. And also because last year, we always have our 4 meetings, which are required according to the law. Last year, we had to add the 2 additional public meetings, as Lori stated as well. I think we had an additional one as well, because we had to make this, we had to have the public meetings and then we had to vote. And sometimes you can't get all of that done in that same time. So I think we had a follow-up virtual meeting to assure that we vote and we knew what we were representing to the board. And obviously to finalize to prepare for our annual report at the end of the year. But this year, ironically and gladly, looks like our parent membership has increased. And I've had some that have reached out already that intend to attend this week. Our first SHAC meeting will be on Thursday. So I think we're going in a positive direction where the knowledge is getting out there, because we've made a lot of, different ways and requests to try to get more parent involvement. And I think it's starting to reach them now, and hopefully that increases our membership.
Micaeli?
Yeah, so I am definitely always hustling for more participation in SHAC and Comal ISD. We are definitely still in a place where I say, if you have a pulse and a passion for wellness, then come join the SHAC. So our participation with the work that we're doing currently has increased because it's a topic that a lot of people are interested in being a part of. Over COVID, meeting virtually also helped with participation, just because we are so spread out geographically. There really isn't a common place that works for everyone. So right now we are 50% parents. That kind of fluctuates every meeting, but got some good ideas from C-Summit this year and ways to help boost participation. We're providing childcare now and partnering with some of our student organizations. I do a raffle every meeting. So any ideas to just generate that excitement for being there and sort of reward people for their time.
Awesome. Okay, we have a couple of questions. One of them is, can we make 2 of our 4 meetings public instead of holding 6? And then I'm going to assume that you are talking about when you are having to review curriculum in front and make it part of your meeting. Yes, technically you could do that. I would make sure that, again, you check with everybody in your school district. that you're going to hold a public SHAC meeting. And in that public SHAC meeting, one of those things you're going to cover is the review of the curriculum. And make sure that everybody is on the same page, that nobody feels like it needs to be separate, because sometimes that is a point that I have heard some districts take. It's not, this is one of those, I don't want to say it's a gray area, but it is one of those things where your district has to determine what is going to be best for their district. Does LeeAnn, Micaeli, or Laura, do y'all have anything to add to that? Okay. And then how long are your officers valid for? Officers, really, honestly, there's nothing written in law about your SHAC composition other than 50% must be parents. And then they do have suggested areas like police and clergy and all these things. But with regards to how your officers are done, your chairs, your the only thing it says is one must be a parent. It doesn't talk about it needing to be 3 years, 4 years, or anything like that. You have that option. That would kind of go back to default to what your school district has in place, whether it's a regulation, bylaws, or policy on how your SHAC runs. And then, did y'all have anything you want to add to that one either?
I did see in the TEC that it says that the board's supposed to send 5 people, appoint, sorry, couldn't think of the right word, appoint 5 people to the SHAC.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
like-
and that comes back to another question. Somebody asked, does your board place people on the SHAC or assign people to SHAC? And yes, they can do that as well.
They have to, Rachel.
I'm
They
sorry.
can,
The
yes.
board has to appoint. The original
They
law,
appoint everyone, but I think what this person is asking is like, do they recommend, the appointment comes in a formal meeting where they're going to appoint and approve everybody that's on the SHAC, but do they recommend anyone for the SHAC and then that person becomes part of the appointment, is I think what the question is asking.
it's, that one is so vague that everybody gets confused. The board should be appointing people that they feel should be on the SHAC. That's
Right.
5 people.
But the recruitment process is the vague part.
Right. That's up to each district how they plan to do that. Our district might identify potential members and send them to the board, and then also ask each board member to identify one person. But that's up to each district. But they do have to appoint them. And the law was really intended that they appoint all SHAC members,
Correct.
not just 5. The 5 was relating to you need to have at least 5 members on your SHAC.
Correct.
So just for clarification on that, it's confusing.
It is confusing. Yeah, that's one of those things. And it's how everybody reads into it. So somebody asked, can we give them our list and let them approve or disapprove?
Yeah.
Yes, that is a possibility. But again, this is one of those things where you have to go back to your district and ask how they want to handle this. Is it going to, what type of action item is it going to be in the board meeting? How do they want it to go forth? So again, some of these things, while my old district would have handled it one way, LeeAnn's may do it one way, Micaeli's will do it another way, Lori's may do it another way. The board does have to appoint, that is in the law. And 5 members must exist, that's in the law, and they must be 50% parents, that's in the law. From that point on, how you go about it can differ a little bit from district to district.
Definitely. Several people have asked what time of day you guys are meeting. Can y'all share when your SHACs meet?
Ours are in the evening around 6 o'clock.
We have moved ours from dinner to lunch to dinner in an effort to boost participation. So this year we're back at the dinner hour and providing meals with that as well.
Ours is at lunch. Ours is at noon. Our public meetings in the past were obviously in the evening. Or actually, we did one at lunch and we did one in the evening to hopefully capture as many that want to participate or as necessary. But ours have in the past and currently are at lunch.
And we have a question that's asking, Dallas ISD just shared that they meet from 5:30 to 6:45. We also have a question on, does the board appoint or decide who is going to be the individual in charge of facilitating the SHAC? If you're talking about the chair, which has to be a parent, or a co-chair that has to be a parent, then yes, the board would be appointing that. Doesn't mean that they had to decide that. That would have been determined within your regulations, your policy, your bylaws, whatever you have that is being used for your district. But it could be that the person that's overseeing it from the district perspective would be decided by the superintendent and then approved by the board. Again, these are kind of those areas where your district is going to kind of follow what they need to follow. Michelle, Lori, Micaeli, LeeAnn, do you want to add anything to that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think there's some conflicting views on this. You know, the district should identify somebody at the district who is the person that coordinates with the SHAC. The SHAC itself would identify a parent, chair, or co-chair in my mind, but I know some districts who have asked their board to actually determine who that person should be. It's not in law that the board identify who that parent is. I feel like it's the responsibility of the SHAC itself to identify the best person to be the chair. But again, the district needs to determine who's the best person to work with that SHAC and make sure things go well between the district and the SHAC itself.
Correct. Okay, so I'm going to move on because we have a couple more slides. I know y'all are going to keep asking some questions and we're happy to do that. So this is one of the other new SHAC rules, which is Senate Bill 9. This one has to do with dating violence, child abuse, and family violence. It has to be taught in middle school and again in high school. And you have to notify parents. Again, just like with human sexuality and abstinence education, the parents can opt out of it. So you have to describe the resources that are being used, and you have to make sure that they understand that they can file a grievance. This again is very similar to what is in 1525 with regards to human sexuality and abstinence education. Lori, can you kind of tell us how your school district has handled this particular part of this law?
Right, so actually, it's, if I'm correct, this one also requires the board to convene the SHAC to review the materials. So we did not make that part of last year. So we're just talking about doing that for this year. And that'll be number one thing on our list to do. Actually, and I know one of the other questions was, did we use the TASB form or did we create our own resolution? And I think we used the TASB to create our own combination.
As kind of a template.
Mhm.
Awesome. Micaeli?
Yeah, we obviously just started the process this year. So we went ahead and combined the House bill and the Senate bill topics in our request to the board.
That's what I was hoping we had done, but we didn't.
Yeah.
LeeAnn?
We did both as well this past year. So our board has already approved not only our human sexuality, but also our dating violence prevention items. So we are implementing. So when we did our public meetings, we covered both. We hit our curriculum as well as our dating violence prevention topics. So those were presented to the board at the end of last year, and they were approved this summer.
Great job. I know that we are getting asked some questions. One of the questions that we were asked about is, it's very frustrating to have the opt-in process because students need to hear the information. How have you managed the opt-in process? Whether it is for this particular information or for sex ed, how is that process going for you? Are your teachers struggling? Be very candid in this discussion. Let's start with LeeAnn first.
Well, if we recall, we've basically always had the annual notice, right? And then secondarily, we've always customarily in all districts had some form of notification where we say, here are our human sexuality or health human sexuality components that we're going to teach in our health class. And before it was kind of opt out. So if parents didn't opt out, we were instructing the students. So we're not totally doing anything different. We just have specific stipulations according to the law that we now have to do. So what we've done in our district, and we're in that process right now, is we use Skyward kind of as our parent access and notification system. So literally on September 7th, we sent out our annual notice. A little bit later, we just wanted to make sure we had everything in there that we needed. We were according to the law. And obviously we had our approval by the board. So we sent our annual parent notice out through our Skyward Access Center. So basically it stays on the parent Skyward profile, as well as sends out an email blast with the annual letter. We actually embed it at the end of that letter, essentially the parent opt-in option with instructions. And then 3 days later, we sent out the human sexuality and responsibility parent opt-in letter as well, so that it included instructions for parents to go. We put the opt-in form on our Skyward as well, so that they could go in and choose to opt in or opt out on the online form. So what I wanted to be able to digitally track it initially to see if we're getting responses and try to get as many responses as quickly as possible, and obviously start as early as possible. So we essentially started about 60 days before we will start instruction, which will start our HSR instruction in November. And that gives us about 60 days in which to communicate. If we recall, with our opt-in form or our opt-in letter to parents, we have to send it at least 14 days prior to instruction. It does not say it has to be 14 days, it says at least. So we've already sent that out, and then that gives us the opportunity. We're going to send a reminder October 1. We'll send another reminder about 2 weeks out. And what's great is beginning October, we're turning that process over to our teachers, where they'll then be able to see all opt-in access in gradebook. They'll be able to themselves see if parents have opted in, as well as mark them as opted in or opted out. So at that point, our teachers can then start sending paper letter homes. I've created a Google form, which basically will reflect the opt-in letter. Whatever method we have to do to get as many opt-in responses as possible is what we're going to do. So we're in that process. We don't know, I don't have all the data to say how well it's going, but I know on the same date that we sent that annual parent letter and we embedded the opt-in form at the end of that letter, when I looked at the end of the day, because we had staff development that day, I'd already begun to get responses. So for me, that was a win, and that makes me happy.
Micaeli or Laura, do you have anything to add?
We have a very, very similar process. We implemented the opt-in process last year. We started with a paper form. We are moving to a digital form as well, which I would highly recommend. We haven't seen a huge drop off in participants for students, which was good after a lot of fear that that was going to happen. But other than that, we're pretty in line with what LeeAnn explained.
And Lori?
Agreed. LeeAnn had a great process, and we attempted that last year with not a huge success. So we're going to try again this year to do both the digital and the hard copy and start earlier. We were kind of on the, oh my gosh, we got to do this, and got caught a little on our heels last year. So we will definitely start earlier this year and hopefully have a better outcome.
We have been asked, and I'm going to throw this at y'all because while we were talking, I was trying to go through, I know on my slide, I have that it's in middle school and in high school, but somebody is asking why and where in the law does it say middle school and high school? I think that goes back to the TEKS, if I'm not mistaken. But LeeAnn and Micaeli, Lori, do you want to, it's written in the TEKS, but I'm gonna let y'all kind of expand on that if you want.
Well, there are components of dating violence, specifically child abuse, family violence in our elementary TEKS as well. So I just encourage you guys to really take a look at the TEKS now from K through 12. Our SHAC from our review last year and the resources and the vendors, publishers that presented to us, we decided for specifically with our prevention of dating violence, child abuse for grades 3 through 12. But there are TEKS in there for grades K through 2. So and I know other districts, as we've had some coordinating meetings for North Texas thus far that are doing in total. I think Highland Park is one of those districts where K through 12, they're doing the dating violence and child abuse prevention TEKS as well. Our district and our SHAC recommended 3 through 12, and that is what our board approved. So I just really encourage, just finally review the TEKS, and then that way you'll know what's available. And then when you are making a decision as a SHAC and then presenting to the board, then you guys can make the best conscientious decision for your community. And I think that's where we lie.
Micaeli or Lori?
I don't have
Very
anything more
well
to
said, yeah.
Yeah, well said, LeeAnn.
I put a link to a document that kind of has the TEKS that I did because I don't like the way TEA does it. You can't see them aligned. So I did put my document in there, and feel free to, and if you ever see any type errors, just let me know.
And I guess what I do want to say, oh, that's a great document, by the way. I just kind of clicked on that. I know that in the slide, it says it must be middle school and high school. I know that SB 9 doesn't specifically state that. So for the individual that was asking that, I will probably tweak that on the slide because it doesn't specifically state it has to be middle school and high school, but it does talk about the school district determining what grade levels are appropriate. Then you have to also take into account your TEKS. And so that kind of pushes that to be in a middle school and high school situation. Okay, so let's move on to, does anyone have anything else they want to add about Senate Bill 9?
I noticed somebody else in the chat asked about copies of the letters that are used for the opt-in process. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to share a Google folder with the letter that we use, as well as all of the resources that I could think to compile that might be helpful as you approach your district administration and your board pertaining to the two bills.
Awesome, thank you for doing that. And then, oops, I gotta go back to my PowerPoint. The next thing we're gonna cover is the new materials and new TEKS. So everything happened with SHAC. We have those two laws that SHAC's dealing with. And then on top of everything, you have Proclamation 22 and new TEKS for PE and health, K through 12. That's a lot of people. So just give yourself some grace. I can't say that enough to people when they call me and they're stressing out. This is unheard of. Again, the perfect storm. So Proclamation 22, what I want to make sure that everybody understands is that is truly the adoption of health and PE materials. It's similar to math or Spanish or one of those. It is where you go through and you choose the textbooks and those materials. It is not necessarily your curriculum, because your curriculum could actually be a separate documentation that you use these items as resources. So sometimes we interchange that verbiage, but they're not the same. So on Proclamation 22, I have a link there, and we can share that link as well. That takes you to the actual page for Texas Education Agency. Hopefully all of our school districts have gone through this process, but I'm going to kind of just briefly allow each of our panelists to talk about how they managed Proclamation 22. Did they feel like it went okay? They'll be candid about it. And let's start with Micaeli first.
Okay. I feel like it went okay. That's a great word to describe it. Yeah, so I first solicited feedback from obviously the SHAC and my PE and health teachers, and we compiled a review committee. We had a curriculum information night where anybody in the community could come and learn about the short list of curriculums that we had compiled. And then ultimately that committee made decisions from there. It was relatively quick and painless. Obviously would have loved to have more participation and feedback in that process, but we had a relatively short timeline to get a lot done. And so, so we did that. So Yeah, I would say okay. It went okay. Yes,
And with everything else going on, that's all you have to do. It's okay.
yes,
Lori, do
absolutely.
you want to share?
Yeah, we're pretty much right on the same as what Micaeli said. I would say our district really wanted to like get it done. So I think we went to the school board in December and approved ours in December of last year. And later was happy that we were done and everybody else was going, hey, what do we do? It was good.
And you hit all your purchasing dates, which is extremely important.
Extremely important. I think we were probably one of the first ones, if not the first in the state to go ahead and say, yep, we're going to take this and this and this. And thank you very much.
Good job, Lori. And LeeAnn, how about you?
We wanted to be early. It did not work out in our favor. I will not say my favor, our favor as a district, but we did get it done and approved before this school year. And probably just the biggest thing for our district is just providing, and I think because we did go through a pandemic and learned how to utilize, just virtual meetings, just capitalize on that. Like having a public meeting in person, or even just sending out the information initially, but then the publishers and vendors are more than happy to come as much as necessary. I mean, they are on speed dial in my phone. If I text them, they respond. If I email, they respond. I think it made it easy when it was time for decision-making time, that we had the publishers that we ended up going with, those vendors, they had presented virtually and or in person multiple times. And when I say multiple times, I mean more than 2, more than 3, some more than 4 or 5 or 6, right? Which means our parents, our teachers, which are our educational experts, our instructional experts, like our parents, our teachers, our community members, anyone that's on our SHAC, everyone that was on our instructional materials adoption committee, had multiple times to be in those resources, read, review, navigate through them, learn how to use them, ask questions. Okay, now can you talk to me about diversity? Is everyone represented? Am I seeing, all students represented, whether this has to do with ethnicity and or disabilities, just all the things you want to see when you're actually going to adopt a text. They'd seen it so much that they were comfortable, they knew who to ask questions, and they knew what they wanted to have in that resource. So then when it was decision-making time, it made it easier.
Great job. And ladies, congratulations to you for pulling that off. That's a lot. On top of everything else, but let's start. We have like 6 minutes, give or take. I know we may have some questions, but we've been answering them as we go as well. But the new TEKS, so you had PE and you had health TEKS. Everybody's overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed with HB 1525 and SB 9 and Proclamation 22. Where are you with your new TEKS? Obviously, everybody had to start implementing by law August 1. Have you gotten your curriculum completely updated and you're just sailing through and everything's great? Or are you still in the process? Lori, how
I'm
about
definitely still writing. Sorry
LeeAnn,
if
start
I
out.
jumped in there. There's no way. There's just no way, at least for us, just due to our timeline. I wish we were done as early as Lori was in spring. And I'll be honest, like you guys don't even know how many times I've emailed Lori through this process, or who I'm replacing today, Sandy from Irving ISD or Austin ISD before she just, we're a community, like we're all just learning from each other. So don't be afraid to ask questions and ask for help and see what someone else has done, because I wouldn't have been able to help, our committee, our SHAC, our district get approved without the help of people that are on this call right now, or that's in our state of Texas. But most importantly, no, we're not. And we're still writing, but we know. And you just have to effectively and openly communicate, and then lean on your writers and those that you have available to write this process as we go along.
Micaeli?
Yes, I would agree wholeheartedly. We are definitely still in the trenches with new curriculum. We did a side-by-side comparison with the curriculum that we wrote as a district with the previous TEKS to see where the new TEKS helped align. and then where our new curriculum resources could help supplement, while we form some writing teams to start updating all of those documents. But there was no way that that was going to get done before the start of this school year. So we are kind of taking it unit by unit and making sure that the teachers have what they need as early as possible.
And that's kind of the approach we were taking as well. Lori?
Yeah, same. We were able, because we adopted early, we were able to start a little earlier, and I had teams come in last year and get our scope and sequence in order and some basics. And so over the summer was able to pretty much finalize those scope and sequences and add in the new resources as well as some of our other favorite resources out there. So we're pretty much done, just maybe tweaking.
And I think LeeAnn couldn't have stated it better. I'm going to stop sharing here in just a minute, but I want to make sure that everybody realizes you have lots of resources. These are just two, Texas SHAC Network, TAHPERD, and then again, all of us. I'm like, I can't tell you how important my phone is to me, because I have Micaeli in my phone. I have, used to be Michelle Resnick. Some of us, they're retiring off, but we talk to each other all the time because there's nobody else like us in our districts. And there's no point in reinventing the wheel. You have people to talk to. So for those of you that are sitting on this call and you're not in the PE Health Network necessarily, that does not mean that you can't reach out and call one of us. I can't tell you the number of associate superintendents I've talked to, the number of superintendents I've talked to, the number of head of health services, everything, that are just wondering like how to even tackle something, or they're confused about the verbiage. There are no stupid questions. I can honestly tell you, because this is a lot. And you just, if anything, you just need to be aware of the fact that you're going to come out of this okay. And so as we take questions and wrap up and I stop sharing my screen, I just want you to know that you can't calm the storm. This isn't going to go away by anything you do. So stop trying. What can you do? What you can do is calm yourself. The storm will pass. Take care of you. Your district needs you. Your district needs the person that you are to be the calm person through all of this. No, it will pass. This is a lot. If you take anything away from this, is that you have a resource and a network of people to reach out to that are willing to help you. You should be behind. I mean, don't feel like because you don't have it all done, nobody on this call does either. And these are people that have been doing these jobs for a while, maybe not LeeAnn as much, but a lot of us have been doing the jobs for a while. So give yourself some grace, take a breather, and be prepared for reaching out to people. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn this over to Michelle. Does anybody else have anything they want to share?
Just continue to build your network. I couldn't have done it without the network.
Stop share.
Same. There are too many new things and you don't know what you don't know. So reaching out to area districts that are one step ahead of you has been invaluable for look-fors, what to watch out for, things like that when you're embarking on some of these things.
The only thing I saw in the chat was a question on with students that parents have opted out, and what are those students going to learn? For our SHAC and through our IMA committee, we decided that those students would have social emotional learning lessons. That was what we decided through our district, and our board approved that. So our council department is helping us in that area in providing those SEL lessons and units for our human sexuality and responsibility unit. So any students that opted out, that is what their instruction will be. And what that looks like on a campus is campus-based, because all of our campuses have different schedules. Teachers may be assigned at different times. So in my communication to administrators as well as to my teachers is start that conversation early of what that looks like, so you guys can have a devised plan to know where do these students go during this period or this part of the day or on these days when we're having our HSR instruction.
Okay.
Go
If
ahead.
there are any other questions, throw them in there. I'm just going to run real quick through. We've developed what's called the Texas SHAC Network when the pandemic hit to try to pull together people that could be supportive of school health advisory councils. We have about close to 300 members on the SHAC network now, and they're spread out among over 120 different districts. So I feel like we're beginning to get a really strong group. You can join the SHAC network. You can go to the SHAC network website and you'll be able to join there. And there you will also find a lot of resources and connecting links to some of the things we talked about today. All of the laws that pertain to SHAC are on the network. All of the TEA links. So just go explore there and you'll find a lot of the different resources that you're looking for, and as well as hopefully some resources that we may not have covered today. And just quickly too, we have a webinar coming up on October 10th around mental health, and we will be continuing to work on SHACs and TEKS and other great topics during our Healthy Kids Summit, which will be November 15th and 16th. And that's going to be a free event. It'll be virtual. So any other questions you guys have, throw them into the chat box. I think there was one question about curriculum. I know that some of our panelists have some curriculum recommendations, and I think I had some that we can send in a follow-up email as well.
I was going to piggyback on one thing that LeeAnn said. Some of the resources also provide alternative assignments with them, so you can look for those.
And I'm not sure what the DocuSign question relates to.
I think it's the opt in and opt out. The
Oh,
opt-in permission slip.
Yeah.
Okay. There was one about having challenges with non-English speaking parents. Or do y'all have any suggestions on how you handled that?
I just last week, I think I had one teacher on one item and an administrator on another asked for just a Spanish version. So I reached out to our district office that does that and had it translated just to make sure you have, your annual letter and your opt-in form ready to go in both formats for parents that need it in a different language.
Are you seeing fewer opt-ins from the Hispanic community? Or is that a big challenge?
I haven't analyzed it yet, so I can't answer that.
Okay. It looks like Jenny has it translated to 4 different languages. Awesome.
Wow.
Okay, well, our time is up. I wish we had longer. Thank you all for your wonderful participation and all of the knowledge you have shared. We will have a recording. We will also forward the slides, excuse me, with active links. I will try to put together a document that has the Q&A and the chat information that was shared as well, because I think some important things were shared in there. And I'm sure we'll be doing it again. This is probably, I know we did one in February. It's Time Texas has an event coming up where they're also going to explore this. Do you know the dates or anything on that, right, Rachel?
Yes, I think it's October the 4th or 5th. Let me look.
Okay.
I think it's going to be October 5th.
Okay, there it is, Paige. Thank you. From 2 to 3:30. So you can ask more questions. If there's something with that, we didn't quite cover and you want to know a little bit more on, check into the It's Time Texas website and visit and sign up for that next event. So thank you all. I hate to end this, but I'll give you back your day. And thank you all for the work that you've done to try to get our kids educated and get our SHACs full of parents and strong participants that care about having healthy kids who are successful. Hope that we can continue this fight, and maybe next session we can fix some of the things that got a little bit out of hand this past session. So y'all have a great week, and hope to see you soon. Bye.